These are the richest families that own Utah, and they only get crazier as we move. We're talking about a family that bootstrapped a billion-dollar software company out of their basement, a family that turned 2 nursing homes into 315 facilities across 17 states and became billionaires, and a man who sued his neighbor's dogs by name, bought the local newspaper, and then got a state law passed to approve his own mansion, all in the same zip code. Let's dive in. Number 8. The Scott Watterson family. In 1977, 2 college students at Utah State University in Logan decided to start a fitness equipment company out of what was essentially a side project. One of them was Scott Watterson. The company was called Westlow. It was not glamorous, there were no venture capitalists, no pitch decks, no Silicon Valley connections. Just 2 guys in northern Utah figuring out how to build and sell workout equipment from a place that most of the country couldn't find on a map. That student venture eventually swallowed Nordic Track, absorbed Proform, developed its own interactive fitness platform, and became iFit Health and Fitness, a company that in 2020 received a $200 million investment from L. Catterton, the private equity firm backed by LVMH, at a $7 billion valuation. Watterson's personal net worth is now estimated at $1 billion, and he remains the active chairman of a business he started in college with a friend before either of them had any idea what they were building. There's a cultural dimension to Watterson's story that doesn't show up in the financial filings but matters enormously for understanding who he is. He spent 5 years as a Mormon missionary in Taiwan across 2 separate trips, and he came back speaking fluent Mandarin Chinese. That language ability and cultural fluency didn't just shape his worldview, it directly shaped iFit's global supply chain and manufacturing relationships across Asia, turning a northern Utah fitness company into a legitimate international operation in a way that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. The rivalry that put iFit on the public radar is the ongoing war with Peloton. Since 2016, the 2 companies have been locked in complex patent infringement lawsuits over connected fitness technology, a conflict the press dubbed the war to bring down Peloton. While Peloton has struggled publicly through layoffs, leadership turnover, and a stock collapse, iFit has kept operating from Logan with Watterson in the chairman's seat. Still fluent in Mandarin, still running a company he started before most of his competitors were born. Logan, Utah, population roughly 50,000, is not supposed to produce a billion-dollar global fitness technology company. Scott Watterson didn't get that memo. Number 7. The Jared Smith family. Most people who know the Qualtrics story know Ryan Smith, the charismatic public face, the sports owner, the guy who bought the Utah Jazz and brought the NHL to Utah. Jared Smith is his brother, and Jared is the reason any of it worked. While Ryan was pitching and selling and building the brand, Jared was the technical architect behind the scenes, designing the server infrastructure, scaling the engineering teams, and making sure that when a Fortune 500 company trusted Qualtrics with its enterprise data, the platform could actually handle it. His net worth sits at $1.4 billion, a fortune he built as co-founder and president without ever becoming a household name outside of the company. What makes Jared's story interesting in the tech context is the exit. Most software CTOs and technical co-founders get diluted heavily across multiple funding rounds before a company reaches a liquidity event, because that's how venture capital works. Early investors and late-stage rounds chip away at the founder's percentage with every check that clears. Jared avoided most of that. The Smith family bootstrapped Qualtrics for its first decade without taking outside capital, which meant that when SAP wrote the $8 billion check in 2019, the founders still owned an unusually high percentage of the company. Jared's personal payout from that transaction exceeded what most Silicon Valley CTOs ever see. And he did it from Provo, Utah, without ever needing to relocate to San Francisco to be taken seriously. He lives in a private estate in Utah Valley, keeps his affairs tightly guarded, collects premium cars, and angel invests in local tech startups. In a family that contains Ryan Smith, being the media-shy one requires genuine commitment. The quiet one built the engine, and that engine sold for $8 billion. Number 6. The Scott Smith family. The origin story of the Scott Smith family is one of those true accounts that sounds like it was written to be told, because everything about it is almost too perfectly constructed. The adversity, the kitchen table ingenuity, the decade of discipline, and the nine-figure payoff that came right at the finish line. Scott Smith was a marketing professor at Brigham Young University in 2002 when he was diagnosed with throat cancer. During his recovery, the kind of extended, uncomfortable, physically depleting period where most people are focused entirely on getting through each day, Scott started designing software. Specifically, he started sketching out the mathematical concepts and product architecture for what would eventually become Qualtrics, an experience management platform that created an entirely new category in enterprise software. He was lying in bed recovering from cancer treatments, and he was building a company. He brought his sons Ryan and Jared in to help bring the product to life, and the family made a decision in those early years that would define everything that followed. They were not going to take venture capital. No outside investors, no dilutive funding rounds, no Sand Hill Road meetings. They were going to build the business out of their home in Provo, fund it through operational cash flow, and grow at whatever pace the revenue would support. For 10 years, that's exactly what they did, running one of the most consequential enterprise software companies in Utah's history out of the family basement. In January 2019, SAP acquired Qualtrics for $8 billion in cash, 3 days before the company's scheduled IPO. 3 days. The family had been ready to go public, the roadshow was essentially done, and SAP showed up with a better number. Scott's personal share of that outcome put his net worth between $1.1 and $1.2 billion. He lives quietly in Provo now, directing capital toward BYU endowments, cancer research, and regional real estate. A professor, a cancer diagnosis, a basement, and $8 billion. That is not a startup story. That's a parable. Number 5. The Mark Hancock family. Before Mark Hancock became a billionaire in healthcare, he was an analyst at Ford Motor Company running spreadsheets on automotive cost structures. Then he was a director at a steel manufacturer, then a treasurer at a financial services firm. He spent years moving through industrial and financial roles, learning how to apply rigorous operational efficiency to sectors that most people find deeply unglamorous. And then in 2013, he applied everything he'd learned to the least glamorous sector he could find: skilled nursing homes. He co-founded PAX Group in Mountain Green, Utah, with his business partner Jason Murray, and they started with 2 facilities. By 2024, when they took PAX Group public on the New York Stock Exchange, they had grown the platform to 315 facilities across 17 states, making it one of the largest post-acute care networks in the United States. Hancock personally owned 50% of the company going into the IPO, and currently holds a 35% equity stake in the publicly traded corporation. His net worth is $2.2 billion, built entirely in a sector that doesn't generate TED Talks or magazine covers, but reliably generates capital because the demand for it never goes away. The business logic here is worth understanding because it's sharper than it looks on the surface. Hancock took the cost-efficiency frameworks he'd developed in automotive and steel manufacturing, industries where margin discipline is existential, and applied them to nursing home operations, where most operators were running loose and inefficient. The result was a healthcare company that scaled faster and profited more consistently than its peers because it was being run with the precision of a factory floor rather than the looseness of a traditional care facility. His private investment firm, PV3, also acquired ENV Composites in 2024 for $20 million, a Utah-based manufacturer of carbon fiber bicycle wheels and frames that is essentially the Ferrari of cycling components. Serious cyclists know the brand the way car people know Porsche. It's a small acquisition relative to Hancock's overall portfolio, but it tells you something about his taste. He's drawn to precision manufacturing, premium materials, and products built for people who don't want the second-best option. He lives in Mountain Green and operates with the kind of quiet profile that tends to come naturally to people who built their fortune in nursing homes, rather than social media. Number 4. The Jason Murray family. Jason Murray is the co-founder and operational co-anchor of PAX Group, and his story runs almost exactly parallel to Mark Hancock's because they built the entire thing together. Same founding year, same starting point of 2 facilities, same methodical expansion to 315 locations, Same 2024 NYSE listing. Murray's net worth is also $2.2 billion, which is what a genuine 50-50 partnership looks like when it works at the highest level. What makes the Murray family's wealth interesting beyond the raw numbers is the demographic tailwind behind it. The baby boomer generation, roughly 76 million Americans born between 1946 and 1964, is currently moving through its 70s and 80s, which is precisely the age range when skilled nursing and post-acute care becomes a necessity rather than a distant concern. This is not a trend that reverses or plateaus. It compounds for the next 2 decades, and PACS Group is positioned directly in its path with 315 facilities already built and operational. Murray and Hancock didn't just get lucky with timing. They recognized the demographic math early, built the infrastructure to capture it before the wave crested, and scaled aggressively enough that by the time the boomer demand fully hits the market, they will have been running at scale for over a decade. That's not opportunism. That's strategic foresight executed over 15 years. The family lives privately in Mountain Green, maintains a low public profile by any measure, and has directed their philanthropy toward nursing education and elder care accessibility, which, given what they do for a living, has a satisfying internal logic to it. 2 guys, 2 nursing homes, 15 years of relentless execution, and a $4.4 billion combined fortune built in a mountain valley most Utahns have never visited. The unglamorous path still goes somewhere. Number 3. The Gail Miller family. Gail Miller grew up in Sandy, Utah during the Great Depression in a household where her father was a shoemaker and money was not something the family had much of. She has described that upbringing as teaching her how to create something out of nothing. And that framing is not a polished biographical detail. It is a literal description of what she and her late husband, Larry H. Miller, proceeded to do for the next 4 decades. In 1979, Larry and Gail bought a single Toyota dealership in Murray, Utah. One dealership. They built that into the Larry H. Miller Company, which eventually became the 8th largest automotive dealer group in the United States, and then kept diversifying into real estate, healthcare, cinema chains, finance, and professional sports, until the family holding company was one of the most sprawling private business empires in the Intermountain West. Larry passed away in 2009. Gail didn't step back. She stepped forward, taking the helm of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise at a moment when most people would have been looking for an exit, and she proceeded to run it with the same operational discipline that built it. In 2021, the family sold their automotive dealership group to Asbury Automotive for $3.2 billion. In 2020, they sold their majority stake in the Utah Jazz to Ryan Smith for $1.66 billion. Larry and Gail had originally bought the Jazz in 1986 for $22 million. That's a return that belongs in a finance textbook. The family's current sports portfolio is anchored by Real Salt Lake of Major League Soccer and the Utah Royals of the NWSL, which they acquired in April 2025 for $600 million in a deal that returned the Millers to the center of Utah's professional sports landscape. They are also leading a coalition of investors pushing to bring a Major League Baseball franchise to Salt Lake City, which would be the single largest addition to Utah's sports infrastructure in the state's history. Gail remarried in 2012, building a blended family of 9 children, 30 grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. And her civic footprint across Salt Lake City reflects the same scale. She funded a 200-bed homeless shelter, a community college campus, and a major art center in the master-planned community of Daybreak, all of which carry the Miller name not as a vanity exercise, but as a genuine statement about what she believes wealth is for. Number 2. The Ryan Smith family. Ryan Smith is what happens when a tech founder decides that building one of the most successful software companies in American history wasn't quite enough and turns his attention to professional sports, civic infrastructure, and social advocacy, all at once, simultaneously, without appearing to find any of it particularly stressful. Smith co-founded Qualtrics with his father Scott and brother Jared, helped build it from a basement operation into an $8 billion acquisition target, led it through a 2021 public spin-out after the SAP deal, and then watched it get acquired again in 2023 by private equity firm Silver Lake. Along the way, His personal net worth climbed to somewhere between $2.6 and $3.3 billion, which he has deployed with a speed and ambition that is almost disorienting to watch from the outside. In December 2020, he bought the NBA's Utah Jazz, the Delta Center Arena, and the Salt Lake City Stars G League team from the Gail Miller family for $1.66 billion. Then, in April 2024, when the Arizona Coyotes were in the process of dissolving after losing their arena lease, Smith moved in and acquired the NHL hockey assets for $1.2 billion, bringing professional hockey to Utah faster than anyone thought was logistically possible. The team played its first season under a placeholder name before officially rebranding as the Utah Mammoth for the 2025-2026 season. From announcement to branded NHL franchise in under 18 months. The sports industry is still trying to process that timeline. His family foundation work operates at the same pace. Smith partnered with Apple's CEO Tim Cook and Imagine Dragons frontman Dan Reynolds to fund and build safe havens and resource centers for LGBTQ+ youth across Utah, a state where that kind of advocacy is not the path of least resistance for a prominent businessman. He pursued it anyway, which tells you something about the gap between his public persona and a typical sports franchise owner. Smith is married to Ashley, and together they have 5 children. The family is genuinely, visibly embedded in both Salt Lake City and Provo in a way that feels like a choice rather than a PR strategy. They are not absentee owners who show up for games and disappear. The Delta Center under his ownership has been rebranded as the front door to Utah, which is corny enough to be endearing and accurate enough to be fair. Number 1. The Matthew Prince family. Matthew Prince co-founded Cloudflare in 2009 with Michelle Zatlyn, and the company has since become one of the most important pieces of invisible infrastructure on the modern internet, a cybersecurity and web performance platform that sits between millions of websites and the threats trying to take them down. Cloudflare went public in 2019. Prince owns somewhere between 8 and 10% of it. His net worth is estimated between $6.1 and $7 billion, making him the wealthiest person on this list, and, by a wide margin, the wealthiest tech founder Utah has ever produced. He and his wife Tatiana live in Park City, in the kind of elevated pine-covered enclave where billionaires go to ski and not be bothered. Except Matthew Prince, it turns out, is constitutionally incapable of not being in the middle of something contentious, and Park City has given him more than enough material to work with. It started with the mansion. The Princes decided to build an 11,000-square-foot mega estate on Treasure Hill on King Road, designed to reference the aesthetic of historic mining structures from Park City's Silver Rush era. The proposed home sat on slopes exceeding 40% grade, which raised legitimate questions about landslide risk, and its scale triggered opposition under local historic district guidelines. The Park City Board of Adjustment voted 3-2 to block it. A normal person at this point might have redesigned the plans, maybe pulled back on the square footage, found a compromise. Matthew Prince filed lawsuits. He sued his next-door neighbors, Eric and Susan Herman, who had appealed his building permits. Then he sued them again over a rock wall. Then he sued them over their dogs. 2 Bernese mountain dogs named Sasha and Mocha, who had been walking along a pedestrian trail easement that crossed the Prince property. The lawsuit, filed with what must have been a straight face, argued that dogs are not pedestrians and therefore do not qualify for trail easement access. It named Sasha and Mocha specifically. It requested damages. The Princes installed security cameras and posted "No dogs" signs along the path. Sasha and Mocha, for their part, have not publicly commented. The dispute with the Hermans became what local press described as a soap opera-type feud, which is a generous characterization of a situation involving 2 separate lawsuits, a dog trial, a rock wall, and a billionaire who apparently had the bandwidth to pursue all of it while simultaneously running a publicly traded cybersecurity company worth tens of billions of dollars. And then things got genuinely interesting. When the Board of Adjustment blocked the mansion, Prince didn't accept the outcome. He went to the Utah State Legislature, and the legislature passed Senate Bill 262 in 2025, which granted city councils the authority to resolve pending land use disputes through municipal consent agreements, effectively allowing the local council to override the planning board's decision. In January 2026, The Park City Council approved Resolution 03-2026, a consent agreement that reinstated the mansion's approval without requiring any redesign. Local residents organized protests. A Change.org petition accused the city of giving special treatment to billionaires. The petition was signed, the protests were held, and the construction approval stood. To be absolutely clear about the sequence of events, Matthew Prince's mansion was blocked by local authorities, so he helped pass a state law that gave a different local authority the power to unblock it, and then that authority unblocked it. He also, at some point during all of this, acquired the Park Record, a 143-year-old local newspaper that covers Park City news, which means he now owns the primary publication responsible for covering the story of his own mansion fight. Cloudflare secures roughly 20% of the internet. Matthew Prince is in a legal dispute with two dogs named Sasha and Mocha. Both of these things are simultaneously true, and together they paint a portrait of a man who approaches every obstacle, whether it's a cyber attack or a Bernese mountain dog on a trail, with the same basic philosophy: find the system, understand the leverage points, and push until the outcome changes. And that's a wrap on the richest families that own Utah. From Scott Watterson building a billion-dollar fitness empire out of Logan, to Matthew Prince getting a state law passed to approve his own mansion while suing his neighbor's dogs by name. The families that own Utah are not the ones you'd expect, operating in places you wouldn't predict, building things that don't fit the standard billionaire template. That's what makes this state worth paying attention to. Which of these dynasties surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments and subscribe to Global Status for more deep dives into the wealth hiding in plain sight.